or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture. Until now.
G'day, and welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I'm your host, Grant Levac, and if you've found this channel intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. Now, today is a very special on-the-road edition of the Unexplained Rundown, as I'm going to take a trip out to the site of perhaps the most famous historical UFO sighting in Australia. And I would go so far as to say one of the most renowned mass sightings and cold cases in the world. It's famously known as the Westall Flying Saucer Incident, or the Westall Incident for short. And it took place at Westall High School on Wednesday, the 6th of April, 1966, some 57 years ago. Now, what also makes today extra special and incredibly exciting for me personally is that I'm going to meet a small number of primary witnesses from the Westall incident at their annual witness reunion event. As such, I've aptly named this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, the Westall Witnesses. Now, before we hit the road, allow me to help manage your expectations a little and provide some context. First and foremost, I'm not an investigative journalist, nor am I a UFO historian. I'm simply a curious citizen and a researcher, and a novice one at that. This video is not intended to prove or disprove what was observed or what was not observed in the skies above Westall High School on the 6th of April, 1966. Rather, it is an attempt to present you, the interested viewer, with sourced information and testimony from a select number of primary witnesses of their accounts and recollections from that day, so that you can come to your own conclusions. As a researcher, it's incumbent on me to remain neutral as best I possibly can and follow the facts and data wherever they may lead. While this is by no means an exhaustive examination and analysis of the Westall incident, which has rabbit hole upon rabbit hole, it is my hope that this video will serve as a companion piece to some of the great documentaries that already exist in the public domain on this subject, and inspire you to seek answers to questions that remain unanswered for you to this day. And speaking of some of the great documentaries that have covered the Westall incident to date, here are a few worthy mentions. Released in 2020 and directed by James Fox, The Phenomenon covers the Westall incident in detail, as well as a number of other famous cases. It includes interviews with various government officials, NASA astronauts, and presents a plethora of archival footage. If you're new to the topic of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, otherwise known as UFOs to the initiated, it is absolutely 100% essential viewing. 7 News spotlights television documentary special, Secrets of the UFOs, presented by Michael Usher and investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, aired in Australia a few years back and revisited the Westall incident. Ross interviewed a number of primary witnesses and revealed a new primary witness that had remained anonymous for several decades before finally deciding to break his silence about the cover-up. Definitely worth a look-see. Close Encounters Down Under was a 6-part series that premiered in Australia only a few months back, and episode 4 covered the Westall incident in good detail. I even had the good fortune and privilege of being involved in that very same episode to offer my perspectives and insights on the Australian government's current involvement, or rather lack thereof, in the UAP conversation. On the creative front, the Westall incident also recently inspired a large ensemble musical. Written and composed by Drew Lane, Westall 66 the musical is set to hit the stage later this year. And of course, what I consider to be the most comprehensive documentary to date on the subject, Westall 66, a Suburban UFO mystery, presented by Australian researcher Shane Ryan and directed by Rosie Jones. If you haven't seen Westall 66, I highly encourage you to take a look, as it's a truly fascinating documentary with a great number of primary witness interviews and accounts presented. And it would be remiss of me if I did not thank Shane for all the information he's kindly shared with me to date that has supported the making of this video. If you're interested to learn about any of these documentaries and where you can watch them, be sure to check out the links in the descriptions below. But for now, folks, slap on some sunscreen, pack that virtual bum bag of yours, and come join me on an exciting excursion to the site of the Westall incident. Let's hit it. Located approximately 52 kilometres or a little over an hour's drive from Melbourne Airport, Westall Secondary College is an Australian government co-educational school for students years 7 to 12 in Melbourne's southeast and is home to over 550 students. While the school has gone through some significant renovations and development over the years, there are still a number of structural elements that remain unchanged from 1966, including the signature power pylon at the southwestern corner of the school, the school sports oval, as well as some of the original buildings that housed and continue to house classrooms. Let's turn back the clock and see what the school and its surroundings looked like from an aerial view back in 1966. Here is Westall High School, the Market Gardens, the wooded area known as the Grange, and adjoining to its south, Spring Valley Golf Club. So what happened on that morning of the 6th of April 1966? Look no further than this brief recreation as it pertains to some of the witnesses you'll hear from shortly.
Westall High School, Wednesday the 6th of April 1966. What starts out as an ordinary second last day of term quickly transforms into an extraordinary event, leaving an indelible mark on the lives and young impressionable minds of many forever. At approximately 10:15 a.m., while participating in their morning PE class, a number of students are left dazed and confused at the sight of a strange object hovering in the sky over the southern end of the school. Its shape, that of a classic flying saucer. Moments later, a science class filled with students attent of their teacher's lesson is interrupted unexpectedly with a stunning revelation.
Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer!
A chaotic commotion quickly ensues.
You need to leave!
The ringing of the school recess bell at 10:20 a.m. leads to a mass exodus of unruly students onto the sports oval outside. There, several hundred students are left in shock and awe as the flying saucer finds their gaze. Some students remain calm and curious. Most do not. The flying saucer motions towards the signature power pylon at the southwestern corner of the school and emits a low-level hum as it hovers above it. Students continue to watch on in both shock and awe as the flying saucer exhibits flight characteristics that defy the known laws of physics. With no visible signs of propulsion, the flying saucer suddenly takes off at a high rate of speed. A small number of fearless students race towards the school's boundary fence in pursuit of the craft, as it moves in a southerly approach to a densely populated wooded area known as the Grange, a location known only too well by school students thanks to their grueling cross-country runs. Moments later, a worker going about his morning rounds of harvesting carrots in the adjacent market garden is confronted by the unknown object. It hovers effortlessly above the tree line and emits no sound. The flying saucer begins to disappear from the market gardener's line of sight as it descends in an arc towards the southeastern corner of the Grange. At the adjoining 8th hole of the Spring Valley Golf Club, a number of golfers going about their morning round are left flummoxed and speechless at the sight of the flying object as it dips beneath several trees that line the edge of the fairway. Suddenly, a high school girl that gave lead chase towards the Grange discovers the flying saucer on the ground, or hovering just above it. Just as soon as she begins her cautious approach, the flying saucer instantaneously accelerates to the sky above. It's gone. All that remains of its presence, a perfectly symmetrical imprint in the flattened grass.
I'm here on scene at the Grange, where on the 6th of April 1966, hundreds of school children at the Westall High School reported seeing an anomalous object or objects, what they described as flying saucer in shape, hovering above and flying across their school and landing in an area called the Grange, which is littered with these pine trees, very, very tall pine trees, and they've commemorated the incident in the background there with a children's playground resembling that of a UFO. Designed in close collaboration with the Kingston City Council and Allplay, the classic flying saucer playground installation at the Grange is equipped with climbers, slides, and flight controls that would leave even Doc Brown in awe. As you would expect with all playgrounds, the Grange comes with amenities for carers and toilets for playground users in need of relief. This one at the Grange offers a rather unique and educational experience for those who aren't au fait with their space race history.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And for all the die-hard UFO fans out there, the rear of the toilets even pay homage to the indistinguishable sport model made famous by none other than Bob Lazar. Or should I say, Bog Lazar. Signage at the Grange offers an insight into the events of that day, along with a history of the site. As people started to arrive and mingle, I made my way over to the group to introduce myself and pick the brains of the primary witnesses in attendance, starting with Marilyn Smith, then Marilyn Eastwood, aged 13, was standing on the school sports oval on the morning of the 6th of April 1966, when she first observed the flying saucer.
Basically, the kids were screaming and so forth, get out into the oval, and there was flying saucers. Looked up in the air, and there was one just hovering in the playground.
So there's more than one?
More than one. There was three.
Right.
Yeah.
And how far is the school from here?
From here, just a couple of blocks over. Yeah. So it's not that far.
Right. And do you recall, did you run to the Grange or did you just...
We did. At lunchtime,
Yep.
during our break, we left. We weren't supposed to, but yes. Kids being kids.
Yeah.
And we all came over here, and what I saw was where it had actually landed.
Right.
So all the grass was flattened in a circular, area.
And has that area since been
It was all
covered
market
over
gardens.
with... Right, okay.
And that was over in that area over there, behind us.
Would you know where the location is if you had to try and track it down?
Oh yeah, we've sort of been down that road.
Yeah,
many
right,
times,
okay.
Yeah. So
And was it your impression that something had landed there?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
And of course, when we got back to school, we all got detention and got the trouble and so on and so forth.
Told you not to talk about
Yeah,
it.
but the speed that this flying saucer or these flying saucers moved, that was incredible. It was just unbelievable. It just didn't, sort of fly.
How
off.
would you
It just
describe the movement? Yeah, right. So
just
zip.
straight up and gone.
Okay.
Yeah, vertical, horizontal.
And then turned and...
Incredible.
Right.
Yeah, just amazing.
And this was at around about recess time in the morning that it happened?
Yeah.
10 in the morning?
Yeah, just before recess, because we had a student that came into our classroom hysterical, leaning up against the door saying, "Oh, I saw there's a flying saucer in the backyard," which is what we called them in those days. And everybody got up to run out. The teacher said, "Sit down, it's not recess." And then the bell went off and she had no control. So we all everybody ran outside into the oval. And at the recess point, my friend and I were sitting on the fence and we were crying, thinking it was the end of the world, because it was seriously scary.
And how long would you say it would have taken you to get from the school to this area here? Was it...
20 minutes.
Okay, got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did they seem to move? From the reports I've heard, that they hovered over the school
That's
and then
correct.
moved in this area.
Yes, they did. They seemed to rise and disappear.
Yep.
And that went on for, a certain period of time. And that was why, because they were heading over towards this area, that's why we came over here. And there were several groups of kids.
Yeah.
I was with one group, and there were several others as well. So everybody has their own, story on what they saw, what they experienced, how they felt. So.
And do you happen to recall how quickly after the event happened that there were reports of military or people of the Air Force or police that arrived on scene?
We didn't hear about that until, because it was the last day of school before the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of surfaced in the weeks after.
Yep.
I never saw any military.
Okay.
But some of my schoolmates did.
Yeah.
So I can only say what I saw.
What you experienced. And were yourself and children instructed not to talk about it?
Oh, yes, the headmaster, yes. That afternoon, Channel 9 arrived at the school, around about home time, and there were several of us that were interviewed by Channel 9.
Yep.
And we got detention for that.
Yeah, right.
They were asked to leave.
Okay.
That footage has disappeared. Never been found.
Yeah, I remember reading on one of the Facebook groups, Shane Ryan said that it did air that evening, but then since then the footage has been...
That's right, which is really sad
has vanished or been destroyed or what have you.
As I was saying to one of the gentlemen before about the movie, The Phenomenon, and that group of African children that actually were filmed at that particular time of the sighting that they had, and 30 years later they were re-interviewed and they recalled everything exactly as they'd said.
Yeah, gotcha.
But we can't do that because of footage that was taken of us.
Yeah, yeah.
I was also interviewed by Kevin Arnett a few years later, around about 1977. He came to our house in Clayton and interviewed me then, but he's since died and that footage is also...
It's also gone. Wow.
So it's very scary, as in, they're sort of keeping it hush-hush.
Do you have a sense as to how Channel 9 would have been made aware that there was an incident that happened over the school? Would they have just been monitoring the activity of the response of the ambulance and police?
Because there are lots of light aircraft also. Obviously, they had seen...
Moorabbin's not far away,
exactly
right? Yeah.
And there were light aircraft in there, so they possibly reported that.
Okay.
And then, the news reporters and that, they're on
the scene pretty quickly.
Really, really quickly. Yeah.
And was it something at the time that you and your friends would openly discuss with your parents, or?
Oh yeah.
And what was the reaction, the response from your parents?
I was always a bit of a loony as a kid. I was a tomboy, so they sort of just took it with a grain of salt. Watch what was on TV, and.
Was there ever any concern from parents that something?
Not my parents, no.
Mm-hmm.
No, that nothing I did would shock them.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting that you have reports of some people seeing folks in the Grange area with metal detectors or Geiger counters and those sorts of things, and if there was some sort of radiation exposure, then that might be a significant concern for parents. And
but I don't recall any of that at the time.
Yeah.
Because we're talking, 57 years ago.
57 years this year, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Did your parents, if I can also ask a question,
right, yeah.
Did your parents offer some explanation of what these flying saucers might actually have been?
No, not at all.
They didn't?
Right. No, they were just fascinated with what had happened also, and they were trying to soak it all in.
Yeah.
But in the same sense, thinking that maybe I'd made some of it up because I was that type of kid. But it wasn't, and as time passed, I realised that it was, it wasn't fabricated, that it actually did happen.
Is it something that the kids would talk about in the school halls for months and afterwards?
Yeah, well, after the break, yes, when we came back, absolutely.
And were the rumours rife as to, what may have led to that incident, or what the explanation behind?
Probably more so today as time's gone on than then.
Yeah, gotcha.
Because we're all like, we really didn't know.
Yeah.
We really didn't know what had transpired and how it all happened and was it going to happen again? And, like I said, was it the end of the world? But, since this has become more public and since all the sightings that have happened and the USA have come forward saying, oh yes, there is something out there, so everyone's starting to believe that this actually really did happen.
Yeah.
Because it is the most famous sighting in the world. However,
certainly one of the largest mass sightings in the world of children, comparable with, I guess, the Ariel School in Zimbabwe, with children that witnessed something land and some sort of beings. Yeah.
And all those years later, they can still recall what happened, as I said before.
Did you ever draw or write down your recollections after the event, or is it something?
Only when I've been asked to, but no, I haven't. I did start to write a book, but I haven't sort of finished that. That's a work in progress.
Yeah.
But it's not specifically related to that. It's about my life in general.
Okay.
Pardon me. But kids being kids, we all have different stories to tell of how we felt, what we saw. So, you know, you, as a kid, you'd say, oh yeah, well, they're exaggerating, whatever. But I don't discount anybody.
Yeah.
Because the Yanks now have said, oh yes, it really did happen.
Well, they've admitted UFOs are real, aren't they?
Absolutely.
In 2017.
This is a prime piece of real estate in our universe.
This is a prime piece of real estate.
Really, if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
And your peers, if I can ask you, 57 years later, having read media reports, for example, on that post over there, which I'm sure this gentleman will go and read and factor into his analysis afterwards, about it being a high-barreled balloon.
Now, if you haven't heard of Project Highball before, allow me to give you a brief summary. Project Highball, short for High Altitude Balloon, was established in 1961 between the Australian Department of Supply and US Atomic Energy Commission to monitor levels of radioactivity in the upper atmosphere, basically sniffing the air for radioactive remnants that would waft across to Australia from nuclear testing sites in the Pacific. The Project Highball balloon launching station was located at Mildura in Victoria, some 570 kilometres away. The balloons were massive, reaching up to 100 metres in diameter, and they carried a 300 kilogram payload of atmospheric testing instruments to altitudes of more than 30 kilometres. Launching the massive balloons was relatively straightforward. Retrieving them, however, not so simple. Those who worked on the project had to track the balloons as best they could from an aircraft and give directions to crew on the ground, who had to collect the payload from where it crashed to Earth. And with batteries on board, fires were known to have started on impact with the ground. And there was also always a risk that the payload could crash through the roof of a house or come down in a dam. In the years following its establishment, there was a change in emphasis, with the Mildura launching station also providing support for balloon flights for various Australian and US research agencies, including NASA. This change led to frequent back and forth discussions and negotiations between Australia and the United States to increase insurance in the event of incidents and accidents, which could have resulted in the destruction of property and even the loss of life. Veteran Australian UAP researcher Keith Basterfield, who I have the greatest of respect for and have had the good fortune of learning from directly, has researched the Westall incident extensively and a number of years back put forward Highball as a prosaic hypothesis. Now, while Keith will be the first to remind you that he wasn't there on the day of the Westall incident, and he can't definitively say what was seen over the Westall High School on the 6th of April 1966, it's certainly a hypothesis worth considering, and I respect Keith's efforts for exploring it. Through his research, Keith was able to confirm through documentation that Highball Balloon Flight 292 was tentatively scheduled for launch from Mildura on the 5th of April 1966, one day prior to the Westall incident. Keith was also able to verify through documentation that a Highball flight did indeed actually launch from Mildura on the 5th of April 1966. On page 318 of a document titled Health and Safety Laboratory Fallout Program Quarterly Summary Report, dated January 1, 1968, a table clearly shows that the April 1966 Highball launches had occurred on the 5th, 14th, 19th, and 27th. So the all-important question is, was Highball Flight 292 responsible for the Westall incident on the 6th of April 1966 at Westall High School, some 560 kilometres away? That question remains unanswered to this very day. But it is theoretically possible that Flight 292 with its balloon, payload and parachute launched on the 5th of April 1966 from Mildura and was carried by the known northerly winds to Melbourne, where it was sighted on the 6th of April 1966 by hundreds of students at the Westall High School. In more recent years, another researcher has built on Keith Basterfield's hypothesis and suggested that perhaps a classified NASA payload on a high-bell flight designed to detect X-rays was the culprit for the Westall incident, and that the revelations of such a mishap, a high-bow balloon with potentially radioactive material in its payload crashing down on a high school and potentially resulting in the loss of human life, would become a public relations disaster, not just for NASA, but also for the Department of Supply. Public outrage would lead to a national embarrassment and potentially lead to costly litigation. Rather than disregard and discount this hypothesis, I decided to consider it because we know that documentary evidence exists of NASA's involvement in high-bell flights. It is clear that NASA was a high-bell customer and even had high-bell special balloon launchings scheduled in March and April 1966 to detect X-rays. So I submitted a FOIA request to NASA requesting copies of correspondence and reports pertaining to Project High-Bell Special Balloon Launching HASL number 2272, launched from Mildura, Victoria on the 5th of April 1966. While the response to my NASA FOIA request confirmed that NASA did not participate in any high-bow flights until 1967, I also decided to file a similar FOIA request to the Office of Naval Research, ONR, which we know was also a high-bow customer and had similar launchings scheduled. That FOIA request is currently pending at the time of producing this video. While I hope this serves as a brief summary and accurate reflection of the high-bow and PR disaster hypotheses that have been put forward to date as possible prosaic explanations for the Westall incident, if you are interested to learn more, take a look at the links in the description below.
If I can ask you, 57 years later, having read media reports, for example, on that post over there, which I'm sure this gentleman will go and read and factor into his analysis afterwards, about it being a high-bow balloon. What do your peers say about, on reflection 57 years later, what it may have been? Not your personal view, but what's the discussion among your peers as to whether it's extraterrestrial flying saucer or perhaps something explainable through natural scientific. You know, there are objects in the sky. I think we all know there are objects in the skies. They're actually become identified flying objects rather than unidentified flying objects.
Well, if you think back all those years, they didn't have that type of technology there, weather balloon, whatever, that would move at that speed. So that sort of discounted that. But as time's gone on, you know, the science has just gone nuts. And, you know,
What sort of speed did you observe these objects moving at then? Yeah.
I couldn't give you miles per hour. I could just give you a demonstration as in that fast.
Okay.
Okay.
Which is certainly not consistent with a balloon that's deflated if
Absolutely
it was a
not.
right.
Absolutely not. And when they hovered, they were just still, and you could see the heat, sort of a radiance coming off the actual saucer itself.
And did it make a noise as it was?
It was a humming sound.
It's like a humming sound.
Yes, but nothing loud. Couldn't see anything inside. There were lights underneath.
What colours were the lights? If you had to have a guess or remember.
I can't really recall. I don't think that they were red or blue or anything like that. I think they were just white lights. Yeah. But you know, as I'm getting older, my memory's starting to fade, and I've got to recall what my colleagues or my schoolmates and that also remember. Yeah.
How close would the objects have been to the school then when you
and
your peers saw them?
Okay, so the one that I saw, it was where that tree is.
Oh,
wow, so very close.
Very close.
And how close to the ground then?
Well, approximately that,
okay.
yeah. You know, maybe a little bit higher.
Right.
Yes,
Wow.
and it was just hovering there. And I looked up and I was just, my mouth, I think, was on the ground.
Yeah, right.
And yeah.
And what was the approximate size, if you had to guess, in relation to the...
size of 2 motor cars.
Okay, so with the width of those 2 treetops combined, would you say?
Probably a little bit bigger than that, actually.
Wow. Okay, so that's significantly, that's pretty large. Yeah. And sorry,
I was just going to say, at that point in your description, you were mentioning one object, the object that you saw. So did you see one object, or did you see more than one
There were
object?
more than one object. I didn't, I mean, the students say that there was 3. I saw some rising and, you know, sort of in the distance. They sort of go below the horizon line and then they become visible again in the distance. But I didn't see more than one in the school ground. The one
Gotcha.
I saw was just that one particular one.
And do you happen to remember the direction where they descended? Was it, if you had to choose a...
Okay, so this is the school ground.
in terms of orientation, I guess, yeah.
Okay, so they were in the school ground at the time and then they came over this way.
So in that direction?
In the end?
Yep.
Okay, and also over there because we were sitting on the side fence and they were rising, coming up and down in the distance.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, as well. So they were sort of basically here and this area. I didn't see them so much over that way,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Have any of the other teachers besides Mr. Greenwood ever spoke? Have you connected with any of those
No,
teachers?
I haven't. Shane Ryan may have, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But Shane Ryan made contact with me in 2010, and I was one of the first that did, you know, a documentary with him and Rosie. Yeah. So it's.
I mean, it's certainly fascinating that you have reports of the Department of Supply doing some thorough investigation and an assessment of what happened, yet that report is to this day not available. Yeah, it's either vanished or it's not available for disclosure. So it's interesting. Marilyn's friend Susan Hill, then Susan Jones, aged 13, was standing close by on the school sports oval when she first saw the anomalous object in the skies above Westall High School.
Marilyn lived behind me, the house behind me. We live near the state school, the primary school. And yeah.
And what do you recall happened from the moment that there was a commotion on the day, I guess?
I was in the science class when the girl ran in and said that she'd seen the flying saucer. And,
So you were in Mr. Greenwood's class? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we all laughed at her and got in trouble for laughing. And he went out, and I think we followed out after that, and everyone in the oval were all looking up, so I looked up where they looked up, and I kept my eyes on it and kept my eyes on it, and then all of a sudden I went to see who else was looking, went up and gone.
And do
So
you
I
remember
didn't see it go.
how many children were in the oval at the time you came
quite
out?
a lot.
Quite a decent number.
Bunches of them, yeah.
Yeah, right. And how many, what do you remember seeing? Was it one object, more than one
Only
object?
the one
And the one?
I had my eyes fixed on one. I didn't look anywhere else.
Yeah.
Except to see who was standing near me, and then
You're right.
and then it was gone. I looked back and I couldn't find it after that.
And do you remember there were a lot of children that were moving towards the Grange area?
Oh, I went into the Grange.
Right.
Yeah, we that's where we did the cross country run through
Yeah.
here. And we all down a bit further, and we all ran. I don't know how we knew where to run because it landed behind the trees. And we just seemed to know where to run, and we ran right to where it landed and saw the flattened circles. It wasn't there then, but we could see where it landed.
The impression or indentation?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember, if you had to guess, what sort of size it was diameter-wise, if you've got a frame of reference as to... I mean, if the UFO playground installation they've created over there, would you say it's similar in size to that?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But there was about 3 from memory where they tried to say, oh, the cows would all lie down in circles, but this was a complete flattened the grass was, yeah.
And did you see any signs of singeing or burn?
I
No,
can't
just a,
remember.
yeah,
No.
got you.
I don't think I saw any signs of anything, but
I've asked this question to others, but is it something that you discussed with your parents after it happened, or it was something?
they would just laugh at me.
Right.
Or they'd make a joke about it, and we were told
The
not
stigma
to,
of the
so-
times, perhaps, and I think I was saying before, we now live in an age where, with the US, not just the US Department of Defense, but also the scientific community taking this more seriously, I think it's starting to break down the walls of stigma and ridicule around the topic, which is long overdue.
Well, I think back now, and I think on my father always read the paper, the local paper, and the Herald Sun, and there was things in the paper.
Mhm.
Why he didn't come out and say to us, "Did you see the flying saucer?" Or never said a word.
Yeah. If it happened today in 2023, what do you think would be
I'll get the
vastly different?
Get the phone out.
You get the phone out. Yeah, right.
You get the
Number
phone
one,
out
exactly.
straight away. Yeah.
Well, on that, do you remember the teacher? I believe it was Mrs. or Miss Muir, Jeanette Muir, that was reported to have taken photographs on the school camera.
No, that was Mrs. Robinson.
Oh, Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay, I got that wrong, Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah.
And
No, I only heard that she got the film, or she either got the camera or the film taken out of the camera.
confiscated.
Mm.
I think reports say the whole camera went.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I thought the camera got taken.
And I remember seeing her at the assembly. We had to stand in line at this assembly about for ages. I think I nearly fainted. I don't normally faint, but we had to stand there for so long for some reason. And I remember seeing her, and she was all red-faced and cranky and angry-looking. I mean, she had red hair anyway, so but
Complimented
she
her.
looked very out of sorts.
Right. Okay.
I didn't like the look of her. And then Mr. Sambleby, the headmaster, I didn't like the look of him. He looked really agitated and cranky too. And I just wanted to get out of there. I couldn't wait to get out.
Do you remember of any students being questioned by members of the military or what may have looked like government after the event? I mean, I know there was Tanya. I think it was Tanya Vassie that came forward, and she.
I don't really recall seeing the military there myself.
Okay. Was it something that was discussed amongst the children in the corridors of the school for weeks afterwards?
No,
or
I never, because we got told at assembly we didn't see it, not to talk about it, and I thought, oh, good, I don't want to talk about it. Everyone looks cranky and angry and horrible, and I didn't want to bar of it.
Yeah, right.
It sounded like it was just a bad day, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
it was horrible.
So move along, folks. Nothing more to see here, sort of thing. Yeah.
I remember back then you were frightened of the teachers, weren't you?
Yeah, well, that's
We
it,
were
yeah.
frightened of the
Yeah.
teachers.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Very
Yeah.
authoritarian.
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't speak back or speak up.
No.
Because kids were seen and not heard in them days. You know, don't speak unless you're spoken to.
That's right.
You'd never
Yeah.
butt in an adult conversation. I remember Victor Zakrzewski getting called into the headmaster, and he more or less acknowledged what he saw, but he said it's no point in saying or doing anything about it.
No.
Do you think the teachers were instructed not to talk about it and they were passing that
Yeah.
instruction on to you, or is it just, come on, we got to get on with school life again?
I think them men in black, which I didn't see, had spoke to them all and said, don't encourage the kids, don't, about talking about it or anything. Well, that's what I think.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think there was government knowledge of what happened that day?
I'm sure there'd have to be.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can't have things in the sky and all the military. I worked with someone whose father went. He worked at the military in Dandenong there, and they're the ones that come out.
Yeah, right.
And he said he remembers his father going out there, but his father had since not been well and then passed away, so we didn't get anything more off him. But he, fully believes that that's what we saw that day because they were called out and they went there. And
I was saying to Paul, it's fascinating that even 57 years after, there's still no formal explanation as to what it was or what it wasn't. And the Department of Supply that apparently investigated it, their assessment or reports vanished. It's never been discovered. So
It'd be a case of they kept it quiet for 57 years. We might keep it quiet.
Yeah, I really don't care if it was a UFO or what it was. I was mainly upset because we were told that we didn't see something we know we saw.
Right.
And
Yep.
I just want to know why we weren't allowed to talk about it.
Being shut down, not able to talk about something that you clearly saw on the day. So
Yeah, I'm more upset about that than trying to find out exactly what it was or anything.
Yep. Joy Clark, then Joy Tighe, aged 12 and a half, also observed the flying saucer from the school sports oval that day.
We all saw the same things, but some of us might have thought it looked, I mean, but we were kids too.
Right. Yeah.
But exactly what we saw is what we saw, and we all bloody well saw it. Or them, I should say.
At the end of the day, you saw something and you then have to interpret it based on your knowledge.
Yes.
And everybody
I
comes
always
up.
say too, why in heaven's name would you have Army, Air Force, police, men in black, ambulance people? What for? A weather balloon? Yeah, right. What do they think we were? So, and I mean, they were there for a long time. They weren't just there for, weren't they? They were hanging around and they're coming and going all after.
They were there for a couple of days.
Oh, yeah.
We're at an airport seat too.
Yeah. Well, Paul was in the Market Gardens. He's Paul was with
From the sighting, from the first sighting, how long was it before these people showed up?
20 minutes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
See?
25 minutes. Yeah.
So they were obviously tracking whatever it was that was.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they apparently had all the roads closed off and all sorts of stuff. So it was just,
Yeah, there was also a couple of planes, little planes as well.
They were circling.
Yeah.
Well, they were having playing cat and mouse. Yeah, that's what we see over the
Not that I seen them, but that's what.
over the pylons. They were. It was weird.
Is that what the craft was?
Airplane. Yeah, that was the craft were hovering, and the craft, Suze.
Yeah, the planes, the small planes that one or two people, from the airport.
Oh, the little Cessnas.
Yeah.
And they were circling.
Yeah.
There was about 5 at airport.
Oh, really?
So that was it.
Where they landed, is it more over this way?
There are numerous landing sites.
Right.
But where Terry was is over the back here.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Is one through here and over the back. And that was on the ground in front of her.
Yeah.
And she saw it lift off. The 2 other girls that were with her,
Yeah.
one had
fainted.
passed out
Yeah.
and the other one ran out screaming.
Yeah.
So,
But Tom remembers burn marks.
yeah. Well, I've got a photo actually I didn't bring it, but there's a photo of me standing in one of the burnout circles where I got taken down the following day by the then Victorian UFO Society, who came to our house to interview me and my elder sister, because she was there as well. And we didn't even have the phone on, so I don't even know how they got our address or whatever, but they did.
Was that Judas, was it? Was it Judas McGee?
No. I'm not. No, there was American Paul
Norman.
Paul Norman. Yeah, Paul Norman. Another man and a very glamorous blonde lady. And they came to my house and with my parents, we sat at the kitchen table. I had my mum, my dad, my younger brother, my older sister, and they interviewed me, and then they took me down. They come back again 2 days later and they took me down here somewhere and took a photo of me standing in one of the circles. Yeah, I've got it.
You've got it?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
For those of you that were in the Grange on the day, do the surrounds look similar to what they were back then? Was it more?
Half of it's there now.
Well, it's not even half,
Yeah.
is it?
No.
Was it was more dense? With
Oh,
more
yeah.
trees?
Oh, it was
Right.
all- it went from the school. None of this housing.
Yeah.
Went all from the school, like the primary school, up at the school. We were
Just
Market Gardens,
Paddocks.
Bush, this, trees, like grass up here, bush trees, all, yeah. It was miles and miles. We used to have our cross-country runs in
Right,
here.
yeah.
We'd disappear for hours.
Yeah. And it's the same that way. Like I can remember the house going in over
That's
there.
right. Do you remember the old one that was in around here? The old,
Yeah, trying to think of the name of it. It's got a name.
the old houses.
Richmond Grange.
Richmond Grange, that's right. It was too. It was an old house and it had an old well.
Yeah.
The concrete well. I remember that because we used to, and there were abandoned cars in here, and it was where all the kids come down smoking and doing the bums, not mentioning it as teenagers do. Yes, it was the place to be.
Right,
Yeah, right.
Are they?
Yeah. I used to ride my push bike around here and they live in about 5 cars.
But the army guys burned that all.
Oh, she gone already? Yeah, she's not well. No, she isn't. Is she gone? I'm up there with Sue. Oh, I bet he just kept going and say goodbye.
Paul Smith, aged 16, was working in the market garden on the morning of the 6th of April 1966 when he first observed the flying saucer.
On the day of the sighting, I was working. I wasn't at the school.
Okay.
So the school kids, they all saw this before I did because I was working on the market garden.
Gotcha, right.
And I don't know why I looked up. I didn't hear anything. And I looked up and there's this object up there in the sky, and it's not an aeroplane. It's some sort of craft.
Yeah.
But it's just sitting there.
Like hovering?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But back then, that wasn't possible. There was a craft sitting up there, and it was glowing. It was bright.
If you had to have a guess, do you remember what colours the lights?
It was white, whitish silver, very bright. But as I was looking at it, it sort of slowly changed its form.
Right.
And it became translucent.
Okay.
It changed colours, went from that sort of shimmering. It was shimmering. And you could almost feel the power, the energy from it.
Did you hear any noise?
I didn't hear any
noise.
No.
Right. Yeah.
No.
And do you remember it? I've read reports, and I think Ryan has stated this as well, that it was quite a windy day. So you would expect something to be moving, being carried by the wind. If it was a prosaic balloon or something to that effect.
It wasn't a balloon.
No, right.
No way.
So it was hovering against the wind that was obviously...
Yeah, it was a solid object just sitting there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And how long was it hovering before what happened after it?
A couple of minutes. Well, it seemed a couple of minutes. It could have been 1 minute, but it was like as soon as I was, it realised I was there and I'd noticed it, it started to change its form, became translucent. And
you almost felt like it had an awareness of you.
Oh yes, definitely.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, it's noticed me. It's doing something. You know, it was shimmering, changing its form. Almost became like, how a rainbow fades away. That's what it was doing, and it sort of faded away to almost nothing, and then it started to move in an arc, and it came round into the Grange here, and at that stage it was just like smoke drifting around, or a gas drifting around in an arc.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you follow it?
No, I didn't. I was working.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Is it something that you talked about with friends and family after the incident?
I mentioned it when I got home, but I didn't talk to friends. I didn't really have a lot of friends because I was at work all day and I worked 7 days a week.
Right. Okay. Your focus was elsewhere, right?
Yeah, my focus was elsewhere. Yeah.
Is it something back then that would have been easy to talk about with your parents, or is there a level of stigma and authoritarianism?
I talked about it to my mum, and when my sister came home from work, she worked at the Westall Bakeries, which is close by, and she said that women were talking there about it, so they'd heard about it during the day. Yeah.
And what was there ever an air of concern from your parents, or was it more of this happened and
No,
let's get on with our lives sort of
yeah,
thing?
get on with your life.
Yeah,
It
right.
happened. Yeah,
Yep.
and
Okay.
that's it. Yeah, there was no concern.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Because I saw the military when they were over here in the paddocks over here. They're not paddocks anymore. It's been a tip and they dug it out.
Right,
filled it up
yeah.
with rubbish. But
What were there trucks? Were there jeeps?
trucks and jeeps were in the paddocks there, just below where we were working.
Yep.
And one of the, I don't know, some sort of rank he would have had, but one of them came over and spoke to my boss about it.
Right.
They didn't speak to me. My boss went over to him.
Okay.
And they were talking about it. And
did your boss ever share with you any of
he
the
just
conversation?
said that the guys reckon that the school kids have seen a flying saucer.
Right. Okay.
That's all he said. But we saw the school kids run over. They ran over the market garden and went over into that paddock.
And this would have been between 10 and 11 in the morning?
Yeah.
And do you remember how long after that military presence?
It was only about 10 minutes.
Right, so quite possibly they would have been tracking whatever it was.
I'd say so.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And had they cordoned off the area for a number of days afterwards?
They did, yes, because when we came to and from, one section of the road was blocked off. You weren't allowed to go into that section, but here you could get through here anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So many people out there that will quickly play the skeptics card and say, oh, that's young impressionable minds, TV shows, Star Trek, those years, and recollections and memories change. I mean, how can you trust a memory that's 57 years old? So what would you say to people that look at this incident as something that's very something of the imagination?
Oh, look, even though it's been all those years, we still remember what happened.
It's an imprint in your brain.
Right. It's not something you would forget.
In there, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
How are you, by the way?
Good, thanks, Steve. Hi, Sue.
Sorry to take up so much of his time. I'm so fascinated by that. Do you object if I film?
No.
I do a little podcast and I put some clips together. So
they're school kids, believe it or not.
Right.
I was the youngest.
And how old were you? What's your name? Sorry.
D. Sadie K.
And how old were you?
I was
on the
7.
day? 7.
I was at the Clayton North Primary School.
Okay. And what's the relation or distance from? So it was the Westall High School that it.
Here.
And so that's a different school, or was that
completely different?
And how far away was
suburb? I don't know, 10 Ks.
Yeah, it's that 8 Ks.
8 to 10 Ks, I'd say.
And what's your most vivid recollection of the day?
The whole thing, seeing it all.
Did you see it from your school or?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was at school playtime, and I just remember seeing a thing in the sky and thought, oh, the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought it had no tail. And then I looked later, to see where it was, and then it came, and then it turned. And as it turned, I could see it's all around disc.
So it turned when you mean kind of banked on its side and
Just turned like this. You see it like this, like you see a plane.
And then just.
And then you think, oh yeah, that's a plane. But then when it turns, instead of seeing 2 wings, it was round, no wings at all.
Right. Okay. And I mean, there's nothing.
And then it went. But I don't remember the last bit of it going. That's the thing I was wanting to be under hypnosis.
Yeah, it's annoying because at the time you weren't expecting this to be talked about.
No.
It's like, oh, I saw it, that's it, you know. And what can I do about it? It's been there, it's gone. And you didn't expect anyone else to be interested in it.
Yeah, right.
And you didn't really pay that much attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you knew that you'd need to know later on what you saw and what happened, you would have paid more attention. Yeah.
Did anyone ever offer any explanation to the students in the weeks after? No. And the headmaster was.
No, I wasn't.
He was
Oh, that's of course right. Yeah. At your school, was it something that the?
Not. I didn't think anyone knew.
Okay.
There was another little girl in the playground with me in my class, And she saw it, and then we said, oh, when we go, we'll go and tell the teacher. And then it was time to line up, and she goes, I'm not telling the teacher. I went, oh, either am I.
No, no.
And was it something that you discussed with your parents
I told
at
my
that
mum,
age?
apparently, at the end of the day. And that was about it. I didn't watch the news or nothing. So for me, that secret was held with me, I think, for 40 years.
Yeah, I was the same. I didn't talk about it.
Right. And how did you end up connecting with other members of the Westall? Through Shane, he connected you. Okay.
What was anniversary? I can't remember the year of that anniversary.
Yeah.
And then it had Shane Ryan contact via email, and that's how I got. And he got me.
And my wife saw it, and I wasn't home, and she rang up. Oh, my husband knows about that, and dobbed me in.
I mean, it must feel comforting know that there are other people that have validation that have seen it, and you're able to then openly discuss it and share your experiences and
I mean, I thought I was the only one that saw it.
Right.
Yeah. And then all these school kids came running over. Oh, they've seen something too. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on? I was saying to Marilyn before that there are reports that the then Department of Supply investigated the incident fairly comprehensively, but there's been no record or disclosure of any report or assessment of the event.
No,
ever.
No.
So there's never been any satisfactory explanation provided by the Australian government as to if it was a prosaic explanation, they're still staying.
Yes,
they're shutting up about it.
Yeah.
But if it was something that was a little bit more extraordinary and exotic, nothing's been said on that aspect as well.
It's all sort of cover
hush and
trying to make out, oh, it's something else, it was a balloon, which it wasn't. It's a load of rubbish.
The classic hot air balloon,
Yeah. What was your emotion at the point? Did it instill in you any fear, or was it more a wonder and amazement?
I wasn't frightened.
Right.
I wasn't frightened of it. It didn't damage anything, didn't hurt me. It was just there. It was just like it was a vision.
Yeah.
And it faded away and went.
What an incredible start to your morning to see something like that.
Originally, I felt that it was someone that had the ability to project a film into the sky and make it look as if it was happening when it wasn't. But Shane said no, there was nothing available at that time to do something like that.
57 years ago, no, that's right. Yeah.
Because I know when you'd go to the movies and they would sort of fade the picture out at the end, instead of just turning it off, it would just slowly fade out.
Yeah.
And that's what it was like.
That's what you associated, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I thought, oh, well, I saw it, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's happened, it's gone. And the school kids have obviously seen it too. But I just assumed, the government probably knows because they send all these guys out to look to see where it's gone or whatever.
Yeah.
But nothing was ever explained to us.
As to what it was.
No. I felt guilty for looking at it because I was supposed to be working. And my
Where are you going to get sacked?
Opposite me, and he had his back to it.
So he didn't see it at all?
No. He actually got up. He saw me just standing up because I stood up and I was looking at it, and he looked at me, and he turned around like that and turned back. He didn't think to look up. He didn't see anything. He just didn't see it.
Have you seen anything in pop culture or movies or film that's resembled anything like that, what you saw?
I have, and I can't remember the name of the movie. Predator.
Right. Okay. The
Predator.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's
that kind of
how it was. It's you can see it if you're looking very carefully.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's there.
Kind of blending in with its environment.
Unless it moves and you can see it better.
Now, if you're not familiar with the awesomeness that is the 1987 blockbuster Predator starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, you haven't really lived. No, I'm serious. You really haven't. The film follows a team of seasoned commandos on a rescue mission in a Central American jungle who soon find themselves being hunted by an extraterrestrial warrior.
One ugly motherfucker.
What Paul is referring to is best depicted in this scene from the film. In subsequent correspondence following the reunion event, I further quizzed Paul on what other films came close to depicting what he saw that day, and he confirmed to me that one particular scene from the 1997 film Contact, starring Jodie Foster and based on the 1985 novel by famed American astronomer Carl Sagan, offered a striking resemblance. In the film, Jodie Foster plays the role of Dr. Ellie Arroway, who after years of searching finds conclusive radio proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. Paul confirmed that the shimmering translucence he observed in the skies above the market garden that day were consistent with the visual effects in this scene from Contact, where Dr. Arroway describes to Mission Control what she is seeing from within a machine built using the schematics from the extraterrestrial intelligence as it prepares to travel through a wormhole.
The material is changing. It's bordering on translucence. The system's intact. There's got to be some kind of electromagnetic field.
Did you have like any sensation of there was any difference about you? You didn't get headaches. You didn't feel anxious. You just was just a normal.
No, just the same. Yeah.
Okay.
I've always been silly like this.
So you didn't feel threatened in any way?
No, I didn't. I didn't feel threatened. No. I told my mum about it, and I don't remember what she said, but she didn't. She didn't say anything that made me feel that she didn't believe me. I think she believed me. And then my sister came home from work, and she said that the women at the Austral Bakeries were talking about it. So it got there during the day.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Were you interviewed by police, the army, or anything?
No, I didn't tell anyone. I only told my mum.
No, Marilyn was. She was interviewed by the TV station.
Yeah, Channel 9. Myself, and there was a couple other kids as well. There was a boy and...
Was it Joy?
I'm not sure, was it Joy? Possibly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it was Joy. And I don't know if it was Colin also.
And you got in trouble for being interviewed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were
But it
told
was
to
worth
leave.
it, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Why did the teachers go mad at you for being interviewed?
It was a headmaster. Well, because, it was all, to them it was all fabricated, and it was, hysteria. Children who were hysterical, and
Some
they
teachers
really
also see them.
I know that, but it was the last day of the term, so the film crew was told to leave. Okay, and it was sort of when we came back, then it was dealt with.
Yep.
We had an assembly like on that day, and told not to speak to anybody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Because we watched an interview this morning, I don't know if it's a science teacher who said that if he spoke about it, they would say he was drunk at school.
That's right. That's right.
He would lose his job.
Yeah.
Said he watched something this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he was
So
even
even
by
an
the Air
adult has
Force.
seen it,
He
yeah.
got told by the Air Force that if he spoke about it, he would be charged under the Secrets Act, right? And to keep his mouth shut, because otherwise he would never teach again, and his reputation would be in tatters because they would tell everybody he was an alcoholic.
So they wouldn't even accept the word of an adult that it was credible.
No.
So how many other adults seen it then?
There was quite a few.
Well, Mr. Green would see it.
But teachers wise, there was a female teacher trying to take a photo, wasn't there?
Barbara Robbins.
And they took her camera.
The physics.
Mrs. Robbins,
Yeah, that's Mrs. Robinson.
Barbara Robbins. The physics teacher.
So who took her camera?
The military.
The man in black, whoever.
In plain
Whoever the military were.
Did come in and said, like,
information out
that's
too.
right,
They can't. They don't
talk about this anymore. And back in the day, people used to get
Did Mrs. Robbins ever speak of the incident afterwards?
I'm sure. Not in public. I don't know. This is Terry. Terry's the one that was. Neil, come here, dear. Neil saw it on the ground over the back here.
Yeah.
So she was a very close witness. Oh yeah, it was in front of her, wasn't it? One of them. Anyway. Do you remember that anymore? Oh my God! Yeah.
had it. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm not feeling very well, so I'm going to stay. Came to say hello.
But it's interesting that we all have our own perceptions and the variations in what we saw and so forth. Yeah, but they're all the same. They are.
Yeah.
They are. I know. But what I'm saying is, it's amazing the difference between our stories. It would make people think and why it wasn't so real because of the variations. Okay, but we still believe what we saw is the same as what we did see all those years ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of the military on that particular day, but yet, a lot of the witnesses are adamant about them being there, their presence. So, it's not that it didn't happen or exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I mean, I saw the army arrive because I'd walked back when they disappeared towards the front of the school. And I'm looking up, I was hanging over the fence next to the caretaker's house, and I'm watching these bees pull up on the across the road on the nature strip in front of the Hume pipe factory. And I'm thinking, that's looking a bit weird. What's going on here? Because they were green, and then one, camouflage and stuff. And the guys some of them had camouflage. They got out of the back, the top one got out of the back, and they were all standing there with clipboards and they were writing and all talking and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't see them.
Are you brothers and sisters?
So, well, to me it was a humming sound, but then just listening to the girls today saying that maybe it was the towers that were humming because it's high voltage towers. We're in the snow ground. Okay?
Like something like this.
Massively, and the great big high voltage towers.
Yeah.
And they're still there.
Yeah.
As a small group of us prepared to make our way to the alleged landing site, I was struck with how loud light aircraft could be heard from overhead. As we set off on our journey, I'll be honest, my heart began beating against the walls of my ribcage, and there was a flutter of butterflies in my stomach. I was both a little anxious and excited, like a young boy waking up at 5 a.m. on Christmas Day. Not only was this the first time I'd ever spoken with witnesses of a UAP sighting firsthand, this was the very first time I was visiting an alleged UAP landing site, the Westall Flying Saucer landing site. And I couldn't help but wonder what the skies would have looked like from below on that day as an anomalous object passed overhead and descended to the southeast corner of the Grange, now only minutes away.
I think stories will change over time, but to have that many witnesses, surely they'd have to believe something. And nothing's grown here since? No. Wow, so that is weird.
And how often would you have cross-country down this way?
Oh, once probably a couple of months or so.
Okay.
Yeah, all the time. So this is the area.
Right.
But when Terry came in, when Terry ran in, she came in from that direction.
Yep. Oh, that's the golf course there, is it? Is that the golf?
Yeah, that's the golf course.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
that's Spring Valley Golf Course.
So nothing is. So what was here before? Bush. And nothing's grown here since.
Not much. That's it.
Surely you would think that would be evidence.
Now let's pause it there for a second. Being both an avid weekend warrior and UAP enthusiast, I was very keen to learn more about the Spring Valley Golf Course, which coincidentally dates back to around the time of Roswell in 1947. Oh, that's the golf course there, is it? Is that the golf? Today, Spring Valley members and their guests have a beautiful and challenging championship course on which to play their golf and enjoy a cold brew or two at the 19th hole. I was also very curious to explore the Spring Valley Golf Course, in particular the famed 8th hole, because lead researcher Shane Ryan had made contact with the son of a golf course groundsman who was there at the golf course on the day of the 6th of April 1966 and observed a circle of flattened grass with burn marks at the alleged landing site. The groundsman's son stated that his father came home that night and said some golfers had seen some incident in the Grange that day. He said the golfers saw it from the 8th green. Absolutely fascinated by this revelation, off I ventured for a round.
Mother! You son of a...
Well, suffice it to say, the old golf game's a little bit rusty. Generously donated a couple of balls already to the course. But real reason I came out here today, even though it's such a beautiful day, you can see behind me there, I don't know if it's clearly visible, but there's a light plane approaching. There it is. You can see light plane approaching just above me. That is on its way from Moorabbin Airport, which was only a couple of kilometres. It's only a couple of kilometres away. You know, that's flying quite low, so that would have been quite loud on the day of the 6th April 1966. So, you know, it would have been very easy for the children to be able to differentiate between a light plane and something that wasn't a plane. But I'm really out here today because I want to have a look at, see what it looked like through the eyes of the golfers of the day on the 6th of April 1966, particularly on the infamous 8th hole, because the 8th hole ran parallel with the south edge of the Grange. So the green at the 8th hole actually meets up at that alleged landing site of the Westall flying saucer of the 6th of April 1966. So I'm coming towards the end of the 6th hole, so I'm still a couple of holes away, but really looking forward to just soaking it all in and seeing what it actually would have looked like through the eyes of the golfers of the day. Because surely there would have been some golfers. This is a private golf course. It was built in 1948, has a long history, very expensive to have around, don't I know it. But yeah, really interested to see what it would have looked like through the eyes of the golfers of the day, because the course really hasn't changed all that much, particularly the 8th hole. That is very close to what it was of the day. You're granted the trees might be a little bit bigger, some of them may have been removed over the years, but the landscape really has remained very much unchanged, as you may have seen from the aerial photography at the front end of this video. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing what those golfers potentially could have seen on that day of the 6th of April 1966. Oh God, I've got to find my bloody ball. Another donation. So this is the 8th hole. This is the hole that runs parallel to the Grange, which runs along the left. So down where those, it's a bit hard to see, but down where those gentlemen are, as they approach the green, to the left of probably where they are right now, is the alleged landing site of the Westall flying saucer. That is it, just in that gap up ahead. So we're going to have a look and see what the golfers of the day would have seen descending from the skies towards the Grange. We're actually at the Grange right now, I believe. I think we're coming up on it, so you'll see. I think that's it just there. So just behind me, just in there, that is the alleged landing site from the perspective of the golf course as you make your way. That's what it looks like. Look how low the trees are. I mean, something that's descending that close to the south border of the Grange, someone on the 8th hole, if they were playing the 8th hole, must have seen something descend. Look at that sun position, in that approach position. If you were putting from there, you would have had a perfect view of what was descending over the corner of the Grange. quite an incredible feeling being here and knowing that something remarkable happened, that I'm sure will be implanted in the minds of those that saw something on the day until they're no longer on this mortal coil of ours. So for me to have an opportunity to speak to witnesses firsthand, hear their accounts and recollections from them directly, being on the location where that all happened, it's it's a pretty cool feeling. So I've never had a sighting of my own, but living it indirectly through those that have, which is pretty cool. Now fear not, my friend. I haven't forgotten about the landing site back at the Grange. On arrival, folks gathered around the primary witnesses and explored the grassy area, which was surprisingly still flattened in appearance and sparse of greenery.
Do you remember if the shape of the grass was perfectly symmetrical, or is it
Yeah, it all went around.
Yes.
in a perfect circle?
Right.
Or was it
Yes.
right?
Definitely in a circle.
Okay.
Still look at the shape, it still looks like something's
It does.
Yeah.
recently been. So there was bush here prior.
Yep.
And then this happened after that.
It's quite an isolated area, because it's all bushlands back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have that then. So
No.
I'm sure we had maybe a small.
And this used to be our cross country in this area from the school to here, basically.
And it was swampy.
Swampy.
Yeah, they
and,
just drained
and
it or
market
something.
garden,
Yeah.
yeah.
Before, obviously, the event, would it be those kind of long reeds was the native fauna to the area, or was it what was here?
No, I don't either.
No.
I remember the area that we saw it in there was market garden.
Yep.
And then there was a long grass which had been planted.
Right. Okay.
So it
Okay.
actually landed for me, and the ones that I was with.
Like there was paddocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't see it when it landed. I saw it just the grass that was flattened.
Was there ever any concerns that if there was something that was radioactive that prevented growth here that
Think
would?
about that kind of stuff
No.
back then.
Yeah.
I mean, we were this age.
Yeah.
So we never thought about.
No. When I was a kid, it's all about exploration and having fun, and yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
And what you saw on TV, what was the name of the day the Earth stood still? When did that come out?
Over there is straight, but this is all just, and this is what, 50-something years later?
57 years ago. Yeah. Has the teacher, Mr. Greenwood, ever connected with any of you to talk about it?
Suzanne
Is it still alive?
Really? Yeah, she's not here today. She must be unwell.
He came out publicly. Was it last year or the year before? I think
He was a very young teacher.
he was only 20 years of age. Yeah. Right.
Oh.
And he was a brilliant teacher.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
A quick question for all of you. I'm frequently on social media, and one of the hypotheses that a lot of skeptics will put forward is that it was potentially a PR disaster incident, where if it was some top secret project that the government didn't want anyone to know about, that would potentially crash on a school and potentially kill children, that they wanted to cover up such an incident. What do you add any credence to something of that?
We're not allowed to swear, are we?
You can say whatever you want.
Great story, great story.
Crocker shit. With a mouthful of salada too.
Yeah, crocker shit.
And Vegemite.
And Vegemite. And cheese.
And what emotions or feelings do you get when you're in the exact spot that you were in so many years ago?
With 13 ago.
Right.
12
Yeah.
and a half.
6.
I was 12 and a half.
Yeah, still kids.
Despite the drizzle, I continue to soak up the surrounds with great enthusiasm and could only imagine what this area must have looked like on the day of the 6th of April 1966, after so many hundreds of schoolchildren from so many different walks of life witnessed, together, what they described as a flying saucer in the skies above their school. Perhaps Joy Clark said it best.
We've gone in our lives and what we've gone on to do. I mean, we've got people there's one of the girls, Jackie, that was there too. She's up in Queensland. She's an eminent psychologist. So, I mean, we've had people that have gone on to be doctors, lawyers. Addis Link was a barrister for years. His wife spoke about it, but he wouldn't.
because of his career,
ridiculed,
right? Because he probably would have said, "You're a nutbag, get out of here," you know. So we've had policemen, teachers, doctors, nurses, truck drivers, plumbers, you know, factory workers, office workers, all sorts of. Everybody's gone, you know, in a different walk of life, but we've got a connection, and it's a very strong connection.
Yeah.
And it's thanks to Shane Ryan, who's brought it all together and made it happen and keeps it alive.
There you have it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed hearing directly from a small number of primary witnesses from the Westall incident of the 6th of April, 1966. Now, what's incredibly frustrating about the Westall incident is that no official government record has ever seen the light of day regarding the event. This, despite the Department of Supply, which interestingly had a long history of investigating reports of UAP in Australia, or what was historically referred to back then as unusual aerial sightings, when the Royal Australian Air Force, or RAF, formally investigated reports of UAS, which it did up until 1996, when they decided to wipe their hands clean of it all and cease their investigations after coming to the conclusion that there was, and I quote, "Whilst not all UAS have a ready explanation, there is no compelling reason for the RAF to continue to devote resources to the recording, investigating, and attempting to explain UAS." And that continues to be the Australian Department of Defence's position on UAP to this very day. Quite the stark and puzzling contrast to the current position that our brothers and sisters across the pond in the United States have taken. And suffice it to say that in 2023, the US categorically disagrees with RAF's dated and uninformed assessment on UAP. But back to the Westall incident. So despite the Department of Supply having investigated and authored a comprehensive report into the Westall incident, 57 years later, after the event, it has never seen the light of day. No official explanation has ever been offered by the Australian Department of Defence, federal, state and local governments as to what was observed in the skies above Westall High School and on the ground at the Grange that day. Now, a number of researchers have certainly tried their best over the years to track down documentation pertaining to the Westall incident. These include veteran researcher Keith Basterfield, to Paul Dean, Ross Coulthart, and even Shane Ryan himself, who has gone to great lengths to try and locate documents at the National Archives of Australia, as well as submit a number of Freedom of Information Act requests to the Australian Department of Defence, Victoria Police, Education Victoria, Ambulance Victoria, the Metropolitan Fire Brigade, the Country Fire Authority, State Emergency Services, and the list goes on and on. A pair of curious podcasters even attempted to track down documents at the Public Records of Victoria, and sadly their researchers failed to yield any results as well. I too have attempted to track down documents. You know, on a whim, I tried my luck going after records by the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO for short, by lodging an inquiry or request directly to the National Archives of Australia. No cigar, no luck, nada, nothing. I do have a couple pending FOIA requests, though, that I'm hoping will shed some light on the mystery, including a recent request that I filed with the US State Department for documents pertaining to a one Colonel Ray Carlson, who was, interestingly, the United States Air Force Air Attaché to Australia in 1966 and was based in Canberra, in Australia's capital. So rest assured, I'll be sure to keep you updated and provide more information if and when it becomes available. But really, until then, the Westall incident continues to remain an unsolved mystery to this very day. And at the end of the day, whether it was prosaic or exotic, I want to know what it was that was observed in the skies above Westall High School and on the ground at the Grange on the 6th of April, 1966. But more importantly, I want to know why it was covered up. Don't you?
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.